Amanda Stoker, the Liberal senator from Queensland, who belongs at the top of the tree, and Tanya Plibersek, the former deputy leader of the Labor Party and a very powerful figure in the alternative government. Tanya, could I come to you first because you've had experience in government. I mean, President Xi has described the United Front as his magic weapon. The Australian Strategic Policy Institute analysis suggests that they've spread into universities, corporations and political parties. Tanya, what needs to be done?
Well, there's two things I think we need to be careful of, Alan. The first is, as you said, politicians go to functions all the time. I've been to Chinese functions, I've been to Lebanese Maronite functions, Greek Orthodox functions in my electorate, Vietnamese, I've been to Jewish Hanukkah, I've been to, you know, right across the board. And that's quite proper because we have new Australians, as my parents were called when they came here, who settle in Australia, who are great Australian patriots, but they want to share their culture. And that's a really great thing to be involved in. What you're talking about is something much more malevolent, which is the attempt of foreign governments to influence what happens here in Australia. It's not unique to Australia. There's more than one government trying to do it. In fact, the head of ASIO has said very clearly that there has not been a time in history where the efforts of foreign governments to infiltrate and influence Australian domestic politics has been as acute as it is now. And we have to defend against that. In 2018, Labor supported two pieces of legislation to try and push back on foreign interference. We refused to take donations from foreign sources years before the government legislated to prevent that. Just recently we suggested an inquiry in the Senate to look at the use of social media in efforts to infiltrate and influence Australian domestic politics. We have to push back against all of it. And one last thing, Alan, you were sort of making implications about the Victorian government. I know Premier Andrews, he is an Australian patriot. He is a fine Australian patriot.
I'm worried about the Belt and Road stuff, Tanya, and I think the Belt and Road is an attempt for China to exert influence in a whole heap of countries. They're doing it right around the world. But look, I must go to Amanda. Amanda, if the fullest extent of Chinese communist influence in the Australian political system is unknown, how do we find out?
Well, I think the fact that we are having moments like discovering Aldi bags full of cash being delivered to Labor headquarters from people connected to the Chinese Communist Party, we know that Australia's intelligence agencies are doing their job. The first priority of the Australian government always has to be to keep Australians safe from those who would do them or the institutions on which they depend harm. And that's why the Morrison government has been committed to giving these agencies the powers and the resources and the police bodies that need to follow up with investigations and prosecutions what they need to be able to deliver for Australians. Well,
now, Tanya, if I come back to you, when Sharket Mosselmain says, and I quote, "As you are aware, the Australian Chinese community has been under sustained political, racial and physical abuse. They don't deserve the slander that they have received and certainly didn't deserve the abuse and violent political attacks they have so far sustained." Is that view... is he entitled to the view, and we talk about free expression, he's entitled to say that. Does it suggest, though, that he might be doing someone else's bidding?
Well, the first thing to say is I thought Amanda might mention Gladys Liu, who is a Liberal Member of Parliament who has public links with the Communist Party.
That is absolutely right. That's quite right. Quite right.
And rather than trying to imply that this is somehow a Labor thing and a Liberal thing...
No, I'm not suggesting that. No, I'm not suggesting that.
I know you're not. Amanda just did. And, Alan, what I would say is we need to work together. This should be above politics.
Yeah, absolutely.
All of us should be pushing away any attempt to influence our domestic politics by any outside influencer. Now, I'm not going to comment on the Sharket Mosselmain investigation. I wouldn't comment on any...
No, I was only using that as an example, Tanya.
Yes, but he's right in one sense. We do need to have robust political debates and people ought not be afraid to state their views in public. That's a really important part of our democracy that we need to protect. But always, always, Alan, we should be acting in the best interests of Australia. We should be putting Australia...
Absolutely. Well, just on that, if I come to Amanda, if the United Front, Amanda, is, as President Xi suggests, his magic weapon, shouldn't we start getting a wriggle on and finding out where they exist in universities, corporations and political parties?
Look, yes, but I think we can take some comfort from the fact that our intelligence agencies are uncovering problems of this kind more and more. That tells us that they have the powers they need to be doing their job of protecting Australians from those who don't have Australia's interests at heart. Now, I have to take the point, though, on Ms Liu. That is an entirely unfair comparison in circumstances where we have the Victorian government signing up to a program that is about delivering the Chinese Communist Party influence over governments here in Australia using their financial means, where we have former Labor senators who have had to resign over inappropriate connections to Communist Party influences, where we have had Aldi bags full of cash arriving, and now we have Mr Mosselmain raided for what appears to be an investigation into his staff and their inappropriate links. The comparisons could not be further from the truth, and the reason I raise them is that
Amanda,
to suggest that Labor's...
You might have missed the reporting in New South Wales papers today about the $1,000 donation from the company that Alan mentioned to a Liberal Party MP.
I haven't missed that, Tanya, but the difference here is that you've come on the program and said that Labor are different because they outlawed donations. Well, that's all good and well, but when it's arriving in an Aldi bag, it suggests that I think whatever your policy might be, it isn't being borne out in real life.
Well, I think, Amanda and Tanya, isn't it true that where national security is involved, we've got to try and have an agreement between parties as to how it's going to be addressed? I mean, these are serious 100%. Threats. Serious threats, aren't they? Look, we'll leave it there. It's good to talk to you. I wanted to have a yarn with you tonight too, but we've run out of time on the budget, so store that along and we'll see actually how either of you thinks we're going to overcome the kind of budget problems we face. I think you'd both agree they're pretty significant, aren't they? OK, good to talk to you, Tanya.
Unemployment in particular.
A big issue.